So I need to make a video concerning Khatra, what it is, why we need it, all that, and effectively how it kind of operates. I'm probably going to piss off a few people and say this, that if you tell people you shoot with thumb release, right, and you don't need Khatra, you're wrong. Stop telling people that. It's bad advice. You're wrong. First off, what is Khatra? Khatra is known as the sideways rotation of the bow for thumb release, right? That's all it is. Now, because of muscle tension, body dynamics, this happens, right? That happens, more or less.
Now I'm going to clarify a bit on this. Khatra appears in many ways, but people more often attribute Khatra to the forward rotation of the bow. In reality, it's the outward rotation that's doing the actual work, and the forward rotation is more a side effect of push-pull muscle tension and simple body mechanics.
That whole motion is Khatra. Now the Japanese have their own term, known in Kyoto, and I don't speak Japanese and I'm not going to try, but the Japanese have their own term of what it is, and the Koreans I'm sure have their own term, so everybody has their own term of what they call it. It's just in the whole short bow, composite bow world, you know, horse archery and whatnot, it's kind of known as Khatra, at least in popular terms. Why do you need it? Well, I'll get to that, but first I'm going to explain some dynamics with the behavior of the bow and what it is based upon what it is, right? So the bow is a spring. It's a spring with a string. Now this string does not rest right of center, it rests to the center of the bow. Why? Because it's strung that way. The string rests in the center of the bow. Now, this is important for many reasons. For one, when we release said string, it wants to reset back to the center position. But that can only happen with a mechanical release, right? Because if we use our thumb, the string is going to release, but it's going to have to travel around our thumb, and when it does that, it's going to take the rear of the arrow with it. Now, when it takes the rear of the arrow with it, it comes out looking like this, right? But if you look at slow motion archery videos with the thumb release, you'll see that the arrow only spends a fraction of its time with the rear like this until it comes back to the left, and actually left of center, and it spends the majority of its time traveling like this until the string releases the arrow. If this is happening fast enough, there's a gap here, the arrow will actually impact the grip of the bow, and I call this arrow slap. Because, well, the arrow slaps the bow. That's what happens. Now, if you have a bow with a center cut grip and you're using a thumb release, well, arrow spine and Khatra just kind of go out the window. So, that's the reason why we need Khatra. And so our arrow doesn't slap the bow, and it's because the string, when you release it, it wants to reset back center, not to the right. So how much motion do we actually need? How much rotation do we actually need to create for the rear of the arrow that's being pushed forward by the string? Not the front, not the middle, but for the rear of the arrow. Well, you need to correct the trajectory that much. All right, you ready? You ready with me? My string's loose. That much. So there it is, center, that much. It's not a whole lot. It's approximately the distance from the center of the bow to the outside. That's how much actual movement you need to create from the time you release the string to the time the string actually releases the arrow. Now, depending on what bow you use will determine how much time you actually have to create that movement. So that arrow is really going to be traveling in a direction like this, whether you like it or not. So you need to correct this by creating the motion to adjust the trajectory of the rear of the arrow out to the right of center. And you do this by doing that on release. There's a few ways to do it. For one, there's a torque method as described by others. And what that is that you grip the bow pretty much like this. And when you draw, you're preloading all that torque, right? You're preloading that turning into your draw. Now, this is probably an exaggeration so you can see it. However much you need is, again, determined by the strength and speed of your bow. More importantly, the speed of your bow rather than strength. So, that's one way to generate the Khatra, right? The second way is what I've been using, is that when you draw, you create pressure in the palm of your hands, right? So when you draw, whoops, and you release, your bow is going to do that ever so slightly. It's not going to be as much doing this, but it will be enough for the arrow to clear the center of the grip and release flying forward rather than center or left, what have you, and then fishtailing down range. It's important because if you don't use Khatra, you're going to lose energy right off the release with the arrow slap. The arrow is going to contact the bow so much that it's going to slow it down. It will. So secondly, the fletchings now have to correct that trajectory because the arrow is releasing like this instead of straight on. So the arrow is releasing like this, the fletchings correct the trajectory, and it's going to fishtail all the way to your target. Now, that whole time, that's wind drag. That's slowing down your arrow. So instead of your arrow having a trajectory straight and more level, it's going to be arced, right? Because you've lost all that energy. And it's going to be fishtailing at that. So let's say you're shooting at brush, or you're shooting through brush. If you're a hunter in the woods, etc. You're shooting through brush. This fishtailing, that's going to catch all that brush. And your arrow will probably stop at said brush before even impacting your target. Secondly, let's say you shoot something flat. Your arrow is not going to impact like this. That's fine. It will impact like that, and that's not fine. Because if it hits anything like this, it has a very high tendency to just snap in half. If your arrow is fishtailing like this, the tip of that arrow where it should impact is right of center, now it's left, now it's right, now it's left. So you have the whole oscillation distance. You have this entire circle to guess where your arrow will actually impact. So for those of you who tell people you don't need Khatra, you're just telling people to go break their arrow shafts and spend more money to listen to you. That's why I don't like you. How much exactly do you need? You have to go out and practice, and you have to do it yourself. It's something more of a feel. And with my recent archery, I'm really shooting more based on feeling rather than any empirical estimated and quantified numbers as to this much force applied and that much for that long. Sure, you can quantify it all you want on paper, but it doesn't change the fact that when it comes down to it, the archer must actually know how to do it based upon feeling. Do a bare shaft test. Take an arrow, no fletchings, and shoot without Khatra and tell me your results. The better test is to have a target. This is really the ultimate test, is to have a target an arrow's length away from the grip of the bow. You draw, full draw, and you release. If that arrow breaks, then guess what? You don't have good form. So I like to tell everyone who is watching my videos to go out and practice. Make sure you're using the sideways rotation, known as Khatra, so your arrows fly out your bow straight rather than to the right and start fishtailing downstream. So that's pretty much the point of this video. And to piss people off.